The National Bureau of Statistics is expected to release new data and methodology for the computation of Nigeria's inflation rate and gross domestic product (GDP). Though Valentine's Day may be over, this could mark the beginning of Nigeria's love affair with the new statistics. Tonight, Babajide Ogunsanwo, founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's data analyst, is here to share more analysis, insight, and intelligence about the revised GDP and inflation figures. Babajide, great to have you again on the News at 10.
Good evening, Anthony.
All right, so we're talking about the National Bureau of Statistics. We're expected to release the new data and methodology of the inflation rate. Now, let me ask, is the Bureau of Statistics, really likely to release these reports this week, first of all?
So clearly we've seen the Bureau of Statistics release its report. What we are now looking at is the president has announced a 55 trillion naira budget, which is the real discussion this week. And so the thing is, what Nigerians are really asking is, first is, how significant is this 55 trillion naira budget? And the second question is, how much impact will this budget have? So to the question of how much impact will a 55 trillion naira budget have, the answer shockingly is very little impact. And why do I say so? Today, Nigeria's household spending, that's monies citizens, you and I spend, that budget is still greater than the budget of the federal government. In simple terms, the Bureau of Statistics says household spending accounts for about approximately 60% of the economy. So what I'm saying, Ayatunde, is the budget of citizens is still more important than the budget of the government. And this was the same fact that in 1995, the leader, the Prime Minister of China, Jiang Zemin, had. It took a position that the people's budget was more important than the budget of China. And so, Ayatunde, in 1995, the World Bank then had brought out a report that the GDP per capita of China and that of Nigeria as at 1995 was approximately the same, $1,400 in 1995. What did the leader of China do in 1995, Jiang Zemin? He took the position that since the people's budget was more important than the government's budget, he did all he could to get these people to spend more, to get businesses to employ more, and to get the Chinese economy to grow faster. And so even though in 1995, China and Nigeria had approximately the same GDP per capita of $1,400, 3 decades after, 2025, the World Bank now says China's per capita GDP is in excess of $12,000, while that of Nigeria is less than $4,000. So in simple terms, yes, a 55 trillion naira budget means a lot. However, what means much more is the budget of the people. The government has to do all within its means to get Nigerians to spend more. And for you to get Nigerians to spend more, Nigerians have to earn more. And for Nigerians to earn more, more Nigerians have to be employed. Now, let's take a look at, now that we've talked about how much impact will this budget have, the next question is, what is the priority of the government and is it changing? And the evidence we have shows that a bit of the government's priority is changing, especially when we look at the capital budget of 2024 relative to the 2025 capital budget. Here's what you find. The government is placing a lot more emphasis on science, technology, and innovation. In the 2024 budget, science, technology, and innovation had the capital budget of just about 310 billion naira. In this budget, science, tech, and innovation has a capital budget in excess of 1 trillion naira. To put this in better perspective, in the 2024 budget, education and defense clearly had a higher capital budget than science, tech, and innovation. In this budget, science, tech, and innovation has a capital budget that is higher than the Ministry of Education and the capital budget of defense. So clearly it allows us to see, yes, the government is moving a lot more money into plans to promote science, technology, and innovation, while it still tries to hold all the other essential parameters as priority.
Interesting. I was going to ask you again how will the reports really affect the decisions of the CBN and government, but perhaps we'll still talk about that. But now the preliminary reports and about the economy, how much has changed, since the last rebasing of the GDP?
A lot has changed since the last rebasing of the GDP. That takes us back to 2014 when those GDP figures were rebased. However, we also need to look at the GDP rebasing figures in perspective with today's reality. And today's reality is looking at the government's budget priorities. And if, again, we take a look at what this GDP means in one hand and what is the government spending on the second hand, it allows us to clearly see where the focus is and which is the chart of the week. And if we take a look at the chart of the week, you clearly see that these are the 6 critical ministries that most of the monies are going into. Defense, this year, 3 trillion naira relative to 1.64 trillion last year. Education has a budget 2.59 trillion naira, second highest. Health and social welfare, over 1 trillion naira. Agric and food security, 1.22 trillion naira. Works, we see the budget of works again in excess of 1 trillion naira, and we see science, tech, and innovation. Clearly, these are the 6 areas that the government is investing its funds in. These are the 6 areas that the government feels will assist to transform and restore the economy, using the president's words. However, the fact is this will help, but the president needs to focus more on, or still focus on, how to get Nigerians spending. Again, if you take a look at the #1 priority based on spending right now, we're looking at the defense spending of 1.4 trillion naira. And clearly, if we also look at the recent remarks by the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Gwabi Musa, he's also made his position clear on what the president has done in this budget, by clearly saying that this budget allows them to see that the Commander-in-Chief has made his priorities clear, and says that the priorities of the Commander-in-Chief are clear, and our optimism about Nigeria's security and defense is at its peak. So this is the first time we're seeing such budget for defense. We're looking at over 3 trillion naira. The first time the defense budget to be crossing the 3 trillion naira mark, and the military leadership has shown that, are saying that they're optimistic and their optimism is at its peak. We also understand that the ministries of education, health and social welfare, agriculture and food security, work, science, tech, and innovation clearly have also said that beyond this budget, the next thing will funds be available to fund this budget? Because I think at the end of the day, there are 3 things that are important. The first is the budgeting. The second is releasing money for the budget.
That's always an issue, indeed.
Releasing money. But for me, perhaps the third is the most important, which is implementing and monitoring, which is, yes, budgeting, releasing money for the budget. However, are these funds being used for what they were released for? In simple terms, monitoring the budget. If we're able to get these 3 things in this 55 trillion naira budget, 2025 clearly will be a better year for Nigerians than 2024. Let's not forget how we started. The budget of the government is important, but the budget of the common man is even more important. Today.
I would definitely leave it at that. Babajide, thank you so much for your analysis again on the news.
The pleasure is all mine.